another tutorial for React. Today we'll be discussing about a concept called React Query. So basically React Query at a high level is a API which is provided by the React framework for fetching the data from the backend, and it can also be used to perform usual CRUD operations like create, read, update and delete. And it is much more simple to use. So we'll see what is the purpose of the React Query. So this session will be broken into two parts. This is the part one of this tutorial. We'll be seeing the React Query fetch part, how it works. We'll be trying to fetch the data all at once, and we'll try to fetch a data based on a single record. So let's first see what is the purpose of React Query. So the purpose of the React Query is used for data fetching, and it's also used as a cache. So it can be used to contain stale data, and it can be also used to refetch the data. In addition, it is used for implementing the common CRUD functionality, where you need to get some data from the backend or any database for that matter. So React Query is very simple to use. As it's already mentioned that it is just an abstraction, you can provide all your data related functionalities in a simplified manner. So as regarding to features, it's mainly used for data fetching, and you can cache the data from backend, and also you can automatically refetch this data. So whenever there is some change in the data, obviously you need to refetch the data. You're doing some modification of the data. So already the React Query library has a cache which should maintain the stale data. So in order to get the latest data, you need to refetch the data. So React Query has a separate API for getting the data, and also you have something called as an optimistic updates. Optimistic updates is nothing but it enables whatever user action is performed on the UI screen, it gets reflected immediately. So the response time is very faster. Basically, it's used to improve the response time of the application. And you have an option to do the pagination on large sets of data. For example, if your backend is returning like a huge amount of data, so obviously you cannot just display those data in the front end. You need to have some pagination logic. So React Query has an option to do the pagination. So we'll be seeing in the upcoming tutorials. So let's jump into our sample application for React Query. So as it was mentioned earlier, this tutorial will be divided into two parts. This is the part one of the tutorial, where we'll be using the use query API of React for fetching the data. In the upcoming tutorials, we'll be seeing the rest of the operations like create, update and delete. We'll be using a sample mock JSON API for doing the operations. In real time, we'll be using a real-time database, which we'll be seeing in the upcoming tutorials. Just for understanding purposes, we'll be using a mock JSON API. So let's try to create a sample React application. If you see here, already the sample React application is created. I just use the npx create React query. So there's a project called React Query that's already been created. And let's go to the folder. Now we'll try to install the latest version of the React Query. We'll install CanStack. CanStack is the basic library for React Query. So this has been installed. So let's go to our Visual Studio Code and see the project details. So as you can see, I've opened that new project structure. It will contain all the details of the React application. So let's try to do our modification. First, what you have to do is you have to go to index.html and you have to delete all the existing code. So let's do that. Let's save this. So let's go to our index.js. So as you can see, by default, it is created with React strict mode. So basically, that strict mode is used for development purposes. It is like very useful for finding out the warnings and also for troubleshooting the React applications. So let's modify this code and include our React query functionality. So as you can see, I included the query client and query client provided for the Red query implementation. So let's add our logic. So you need to create this tag called query client provider. With an attribute of client where you have to specify the query client. You We have to include our main app component in this particular query client provider. Let's create an instance of that query client. Create a container constant which will have a reference of the root element. We have to call this create root function and pass the container reference. So this is what it is. So this is the main index.js. Now let's go to our app.js. Let's delete all the existing code. Just name it as React query. We'll just create a component called get products shortly. Just create that one. Now let's create a folder, React query. Get products.js. So let's start implementing our get products component. We import the necessary libraries. Now we have to use our use query API for doing the fetch operations. This is available in our pant stack JavaScript library. Let's try to create a variable fetch response. This will be an asynchronous call. That's why we have that asynchronous keyword. Let's try to create call of a package API. we're trying to fetch from the mock JSON API. So what we're trying to do is we are going to fetch all the products from this mock JSON API. So let's try to validate the response. If we're getting an error response, we are just throwing an error object. Let's give it a message like network response not okay. Let's try to fetch the actual response. Now this await keyword is used along with that async method. It's basically an asynchronous operation. Let's get the JSON response. Let's return the response. Let's try to catch that error. I try to put it to the console. Just passing an error object. And finally we are throwing that error. Now let's implement our get query functionality. We'll try to assign to the get products variable. Now we're going to use the use state method. So that's why we're trying to fetch trying to set a variable called fetch enabled. So let's do that. We initialize it to false. Now this is the syntax for using the use query API. So we have to pass the response, that is the data, the error object, and we have to pass some couple of variables. Let's say we're using is loading and refetch. Now in the use query, we have to pass a query key. So query key is basically nothing but an identifier to associate this query operation with a variable. So since it's related to fetching of products, let's name it as products. pass a query function, which is nothing but the actual function where we're getting the fetch response. So we have to pass this. And there is another variable called enabled. Let's assign it to that fetch enabled, which we have set it here. So the idea is to trigger this fetch operation only based on user action. It should not trigger based on the page load. So that's why we're having this particular variable called fetch enabled. So once this is done, let's close this. Now let's try to create another constant variable called handle get products. Let's set this variable to true. So this will be called based on the user action. So that's why we are setting that this variable as true, so that it will be triggered. This particular action will be triggered internally. The actual fetch operation will be triggered. So that's why we are handling it based on the user action. Now this is very important. You want to manually trigger the fetch functionality. So that's why you have to call this particular refetch method, which is available in the React Query API. So let's try to create a return script. Now let's try to create a sample button. We'll try to write an on-click event handler and call that handle get products. Let's name it as something called fetch products. Now we have to use these two variables based on the user action. So let's try to create a diff tag. Let's name the messages fetching products. Now we have to also use our error variable and try to display the message whenever an error occurs. The message will be available in our error variable. Now let's try to add the condition for the actual response. This data variable will have the actual JSON response. So let's try to implement our logic. So basically we're looping through all the product list and trying to display it in the screen. Now let's try to print the individual products. So based on the product ID. So each product will have a product ID which will be returned from the JSON API. Let's try to print, say, a title, product title, and product description. Product title, in a comma separated format. Description. And let's close this line item. So you have to export our component. So this is for getting the response in the form of a list. This particular component will fetch all the products from this particular API. This is basically a dummy JSON API which is available on the net. So this is just for testing purpose, but in real time we have to fetch it from the database. This is just to understand the basic concepts of React query. So next we'll be seeing the individual product, how to fetch it. So let's do that. Let's try to create a new component. Get product. It's the same concept. You need to import the required libraries. Again, we'll be using a use state. let's try to go to a use query. Now, since we are fetching individual product, we have to fetch the product by some ID. So let's try to name the variable like fetch product by ID. Again, this is an async operation. Now we have to pass an ID. Now let's call the fetch API. So it's an individual product. We have to pass an ID as a parameter. So we have to pass with ID as a placeholder. Let me copy this from here so that we can save some time. Now if we want, we can add an error message as a variable. Let's say something like HTTP error status, just for troubleshooting purpose. So once this is implemented, let's try to implement our get query. In this case, we have to use get product since it's individual product. Again, let's try to copy it from here. We'll try to modify based on our requirement. Again, what we are doing for the get products, we are trying to do the same thing by using a fetch enabled variable and using the use query function. But in this case, there's a difference. We have to pass the query key as a single product. Since it's an individual product, this query key should have a variable as product. And you need to pass an ID because since each product is identified a unique ID, so you need to pass an ID. Now we can slightly modify this query function. We can have in this format. Fetch, we are applying the fetch product by ID and just passing the ID. So once this is done, let's try to implement our event handler. Let's say we are having something called handle search. So idea is to, like, whatever event is triggered, we have to like disable the default behavior. So this is a standard implementation which is used in all the JavaScript based applications. So we are disabling our default event triggering mechanism so that we can override it. Now we have to implement, we have to check for the ID value. If it's available, then you have to refetch it. Since we are using an ID variable, so this is the major difference between get products and get product. So here we are directly calling the refetch API since we are fetching all the products. But since it's an ID, we are checking if the ID is available or not. And based on that, we are triggering the fetch mechanism. So that is the basic idea. Now let's try to implement a return script. Now we'll use a form tag and call our on submit event handler and call the handle search. We'll have an input tag which be a text field. Since we need to input the ID right to trigger the fetch, so that's why we need to have a text box. Let's link it to the ID variable. We have to call that on change. So based on the value, we have to enter the, or rather set the text value. So idea is whatever value is entered in the text field, we are just trying to capture that value. It is the ID of that product. Let's try to have a label. Enter product ID to search, and I will close this input button, input tag, and we'll have a button. Let's try to have it type as submit. And you can have it as search product. Let's close the form. Now let's try to copy the same thing. Again, we need to use these two variables. Let's try to do that. Or rather, three variables, we have to use it. Let's try to name it as fetching product. It's updating as product details. Let's try to display the product ID. And the title. Maybe we can display the description also. Let's close the feedback. So this is the implementation for the individual product, fetching it by the product ID. So let's try to run our application and test these two functionalities and see how the React query works. Before running the application, let's make sure all the components are correctly implemented. So in app.js, we have to import the get products component, and let's go to the get product component. So here we missed out setting the ID component. So we have to use the use state for setting the ID. and we have to call the set ID whenever the text is entered. So once this is checked, what you have to do is you have to go to get products, and we have to import the get product component, and we have to call the get product component here in the main get products component, so that we can check for both fetching of all products and fetching a product based on the ID. And finally, let's make sure the get products is included in the app.js. Yeah, this is fine. So let's try to run the application and see how it goes. So as you can see, this will fetch all the products on page load of the screen. So that's why you're seeing all these records. If you go to the developer tools, now let's try to search for a particular product ID. So let's try to search for the second ID. So this will display this particular product description. So let's try to enter that. So as you can see, the second record is displayed. So this is working as expected. Yeah, so in this first part, we have covered both fetching of all products and fetching of a particular product based on the ID. So in the upcoming videos, we'll see the other portions of the examples, like create, edit, and delete. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Thank you.